week we are going to dive a little bit into vector illustrations versus raster. We've been working in Photoshop, which is raster. It uses pixels of paint, color, and when those pixels are all very close, very tight up together, they form one big, large, beautiful image, usually photography. But this week we're going to dive into vector. And what vector means is it's, at least for this purpose, it's an Illustrator. And instead of photos and pixels, it uses math and more like shapes. So we're going to dive in. Open up Illustrator, either go up to File, New, or you can do a Create New. And you'll get this new document dialog box. And what's nice about this box is that you can see lots of different options for your sizes. We're going to use letter, and this is just, as you can see over here, this is going to be a horizontal versus a vertical. We're going to use a vertical. I don't need any bleed. CMYK versus RGB, it just depends on how you're printing this or using this. If it's going to be an image on a computer, RGB is probably going to be your case. If it's going to be an image printed in a professional book, it's probably going to be CMYK. If you're printing it on a personal printer, you've got to know if yours is a CMYK or an RGB. So I'm going to use CMYK for now, like it's going to be printed. And I'm going to hit create. So I've got this artboard. And it looks kind of similar to Photoshop with a menu. Then the second line is your control panel. You've got windows over on the right side, and you've got your tools on your left side. I like to go in and do my save. At this point, I can do my hand, Brenda, and you're going to type your name, illustration, and I'm going to leave all the default and hit OK. So far that's kind of where we're at. Also, I'm using a digital pen and tablet. I'm also using my left hand to do shortcuts on the keyboard like Command plus to zoom in, Command negative to zoom out, and hitting the space bar to get the hand tool while pressing down and moving my artboard. Those are going to be some important things to do. So you use your left hand and right hand. Okay, layers window, that's super important. We're going to be utilizing this a lot. We're also going to be utilizing the pen tool a lot. But at any point you need something extra under the pen, click and hold, and you can see where you can add more points, delete points, and this anchor point tool changes a sharp point into a curved point with handlebars that you can manipulate even more. Kind of got to know what you want, and you can always edit it to get a new result. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and I've got my hand image that I'm going to use for the basic hand illustration template. I'm going to click, and there's my image. I'm going to use my left hand, and hit the space bar to move this. You can always space bar, Command plus and minus. So this is just centering it up. I'm kind of looking at my whole artboard and getting this centered. This is my template layer. I'm going to lock this layer. I don't want to mess with this layer. Now after I've locked it, I'm going to come down, add a new layer. I can also do this rollout for new layer. I just happen to use this a lot. And at that point, we're going to call this hand base. It is smart to label these. Okay. Hit save a lot, Command S with my left hand, while my right hand can still move my tablet and pen. Okay, now I'm going to grab some color. This is going to be a tricky part because it's a little dark. My image is a little dark. I'm going to lighten this probably in general. I don't want it this dark for an illustration. I want it to be bright. But I do want to start with something. So I'm grabbing a color in there in my hand using the eyedropper tool. I can double click on the fill. I can lighten it a little bit this way if I want. That's fine. Can also come over to my swatches window. If it's not open there, I can always go up to window, scroll down till you see swatches and open it up that way. Now I can save skin base. Very important to get used to saving colors and naming them, especially when you're starting to work with brands that have very specific colors. Okay, at that point now I'm going to use this pen tool, which can get kind of tricky if you are newer to Illustrator. I'm also going to click over into my layers. I'm going to make sure I'm on the hand. If I'm on my lock template layer, notice how I get this little circle with a dash sign through it, meaning nope, that's a visual indicator. I can't do anything on that layer. So go back to my layers. Now if I click into this open one that is not locked, my hand base, notice now I get this little star, and what that says is, yep, you can do that. Okay, so while I'm in this layer, I'm using my left hand to hit the space bar and get this hand to move it around. I can Command plus to get into areas, and I can Command negative. So first things first, I'm going to draw out the basic shape. And this just takes a little bit of time. You don't want so many points, but you don't want so few points. I find that I've got to zoom in, zoom out a lot, and then I also have to get in there and correct some things. And I'm going to miss that little point because I don't want them. Click, hold, drag to get these handles, and what that does is gives you nice curves, as opposed to if you click without dragging and then you get points. Command Z to undo those, and I can start again. Okay, those are the basics. Hang tight. You can see how I'm going to pretend this fingernail's not here. We're going to adjust the fingernail in a minute. And I'm just going to keep curving around my hand until I get all of these points done. Close. They might not be exact, but I'm going to get them pretty close. You can always Command Z if you've done something that you didn't want to do. Got a point in a weird spot, but if you Command Z a lot of times, you'll lose all your work. I'm just clicking. If at any point the fact that it's on fill is driving you nuts, flip it over to stroke. Now see how I can see the entire thing. Working my way around. I'm ignoring, I know that that's shading. It's not my actual hand. I'm being selective on my details. This is a beginning drawing. And your amount of details that you would put into this would have to do with how much money you were making. Is this a $5,000 illustration? Well, yeah, then it needs to be photorealistic with every little line of the hand. Or is this something quick? So we're kind of going on the very beginner phase of this. I'll go back and fix that in a little bit. Again, kind of pretending that that fingernail's not there because I'm going to come in and redo that fingernail separately. Pretty close, almost done. Clicking and dragging. I'm very comfortable with the pen, so obviously my version might be a little faster, and I want it to run off the page. That's just the look I'm going for. Okay. So at this point, I can look at my layers, and what I have is this really nice hand illustration. And because I've used vector, it's going to be very sharp, very clear. It could go really small so that it's a tiny little illustration in the corner of a page, a textbook, or it could be a big poster. So I like to use this as a base for some of my digital illustrations. If you have anything that you want to come in and fix, like let's just fix this little spot right here. I use the white arrow, click on that, zoom in. This is a shadow, I'm ignoring that again. And you can hug in some of these parts. Now remember, they're going to affect everything around it. So I'm just going kind of slow. If you know there's a handle here but you're not getting it, just click on that point. You can always expand it. You could go all the way around this guy. I'm using my left hand with the keyboard and my right hand on the tablet. And just kind of perfecting these little moments. Like this one kind of bugged me because I want it to go nice and long the way a finger really is. This is not a high detail, so I'm not going to fiddle with some of that. Zoom in, zoom out so I can see things. This definitely needs to get fixed. Close my layers if I need to. Adjust and readjust until things... You can notice I'm doing tiny, minute changes. I am not whipping this around. You'll get all kinds of weird stuff that'll happen if you do that. Okay. If at any point you accidentally had something with sharp points, I'll do an example. You had something with sharp points where you just clicked, there was no clicking and dragging. You could always go in. For one, you can click and move these singular points. Move the whole line. Gotta be real careful with that. If you knew this needed to be rounded, you could always come into the pen, click on the anchor point, click, hold, drag. Sometimes it starts it backwards. Just keep holding, flip it, pull it in if you want the curve a little bit less, and then you can get your curve. So if at any point you accidentally did that in the hand, you could very easily come in here. I'm going to delete this guy and decide, you know, I needed this point to be more rounded. It wasn't, kind of thing. Okay, so far that looks good, which is blocking in the basic color. But at any point, I can kind of hide this. Great, I'm gonna lock that layer. I'm gonna make a new layer, and I'm going to call it nails. Now, I'm gonna come back in, and I'm gonna do almost the exact same thing. I'm going to use my pen tool that was buried underneath my anchor, double checking I'm in the correct layer, and now I'm going to pen out these nails. Grab a color. It gets kind of funny because I kind of want it to be a brighter. I'm just going to make it up that it's a little brighter like that. Pen, and you can start. This may take you a couple of tries. Don't be afraid of either undoing with Command Z or editing with the direct select and your anchors. Okay, so here's a perfect example. I've got an anchor on this side, but this side's all sharp, which is annoying. So I'm going to come in, grab my anchor point, click, hold, drag, and now notice everything gets a curve. Now, you don't want much of a curve, but you didn't want a point. Pull this one single side in, and then you can always manipulate this side a little bit more. And again, if you need to be able to see it, just flip it back to the stroke instead of the fill. I'm also going to come over here and call this nails so that I'm just using the same color. I know they're so similar, but that's okay. Pen tool, grabbing that basic nail shape, and again, it may take you a little while. Pretty close. You can always smooth things out a little bit better. Just keep going all the way around. Command X if you've done something funky. So right here is a very good example of something funky happening. So what's occurring is these, once your handles start almost overlapping, which is when it is, they'll do all kinds of weird things. So you got to pull them so that they don't overlap. The second they overlap, your lines start doing some really weird stuff. And again, I can come over here and get this just to have a little bit of a curve because I don't want it to be a sharp point. You may want that to be a sharp point. I don't. And this I want to fix because it got a little wonky. Make it straighter. Good. Almost done with that. I'm not getting into every detail. There's a whole cuticle involved. There's just more parts of the anatomy. I'm not doing those. This is like a real basic illustration. If you want to avoid having to do this every time, click and drag when you're starting the point. Just feels a little. If you want just the single point, you have to be patient. To click on the line and click on the point, then I can move just that one point. Patience is really a virtue when you're working in Illustrator with the pen tool. Okay, I'm going to click and drag to start my first point. Click, click. I'm hugging it a little more because it's showing that it's the side. And that's pretty close. I'm going to go in and fix this kind of bottom point. I want that to come in just a little bit more. Great. I'm going to Command S for saving. And I'm going to lock my nail layer. And then I'm going to add the basic finger wrinkles. So we're going to make a new layer. Call it Wrinkles. And again, this is based on how detailed are you being paid to do. You don't want to waste your time putting in details for something that someone's not paying for it, even if it's going to look amazing. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to come in. I'm just going to put a few lines so that you can see them in on this finger. And notice I'm not doing every little bit. I'm getting close. Now what you can do, select those lines, turn them all. And then you can also turn them smaller so that when you're looking at this from a distance, if these lines are at a full 1 point, they start to get weird. Like, did you get a cut in your finger? So I'm just going to make them really thin. You can always beef them back up. All right, and I'm just going to do this across the board, and then I'll show you where we're at. Ooh, lock that layer. Click off to get a new line. Back in with your pen tool to keep creating. You want them to all be separate. I'm going to wait and I'm going to put all of them with the new profile when I'm done. I'm not grabbing tons of wrinkles. I could show every little line if I wanted to. Just trying to get some of these basic lines in. We'll do that one. And we'll do this one. Seems a little odd. You want to be consistent. If you're going to do 3, we need to do 3. You know, and don't go your bottom 3 lines on some and then your top 3 lines on another. Just notice how I'm grabbing kind of a consistent 1 in the bottom, 1 in the center, and 1 on the top. I want that across the board. I know this needs to hug the corner a little bit, so I'm going to add that little swoop in there. And I don't really see another line, but I'm going to one in there, knowing it maybe would show a little bit extra. Now I'm going to grab all my points. I can click and drag over them because everything else is locked and on its own layer. And at that point, in my control panel, I can change the profile to this width profile 1, which I really like for things like that, and then I can turn it down, the stroke size down. I could also grab them, I could make them just a bit darker, right, because there's supposed to be a little bit of a crease. So I'm going to stay in the same color palette. I'm not just trying to grab some random color in there. I just like using kind of my main color picker. Hit OK. Now at this point, let's watch the magic happen by hiding this layer, grabbing our hand base and swapping it out. Since it's at the bottom, everything else on top, the nails and the wrinkles, will still show. Swap it to a fill. Great. If I zoom in, I can see these beautiful, subtle little wrinkles that were so easy to create. And then you could lock here. I could also Command A, whoop, not wrinkles, nails. Command A, since it's the only stuff on this layer, by saying Command A while everything else is locked, it's only selecting that layer. Looks like it got colored a little different color, but good for me. I already had a nails selected. It's automatically putting it into the stroke, and I can swap it over for the fill. And now when I zoom back, I've got this lovely base illustration of my hand. Make sure and hit save, and you're good to go. Good job.